On a quiet night in the suburbs of Maplewood, a discovery was made that would haunt the small town forever. It was a house that seemed to be as perfect as the family living in it. Well kept, peaceful, the kind of home where nothing ever went wrong. But as the babysitter walked into the master bedroom that night, she would find something that no one ever expected. The lifeless body of 39-year-old Daniel Ward, a father of two. His body lay motionless on the floor, blood pooling around him. The children were asleep in their rooms, none the wiser to the horror unfolding just down the hall. The babysitter, 16-year-old Clara Thompson, hadn't expected to walk into a crime scene when she checked on Mr. Ward, but that's exactly what she found. Her heart raced as she dialed 911, her voice barely a whisper as she reported the murder. The house, once a sanctuary of safety, now stood still in the eerie silence, the only sound the heavy breathing of a young girl who had just stumbled upon something she wasn't meant to see. The scene was chilling. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. It was clear. Someone in that house knew Daniel Ward, and someone wanted him dead. The mystery deepened as the investigation began, but who could have done it? And what had led to this shocking act of violence? As the story unraveled, the simple question remained: what had the babysitter discovered in that master bedroom? And why had it all gone so horribly wrong? Maplewood was the kind of suburban town where nothing out of the ordinary ever seemed to happen. The streets were lined with identical houses, manicured lawns, and friendly neighbors who exchanged pleasantries at every corner. In the heart of this quiet neighborhood stood the Ward family's home, a picture-perfect two-story house with white shutters and flower boxes hanging from every window. Daniel Ward, a successful marketing executive, and his wife, Melissa, had lived there for over a decade. They were the model couple in the community, always present at neighborhood gatherings and respected by everyone who knew them. With two young children, Lily and Jake, the Wards were the epitome of suburban bliss. But behind closed doors, not everything was as idyllic as it appeared. Daniel's high-powered job came with its pressures, and over time, it had strained his relationship with his wife. Yet, no one could have predicted the events that would unfold on the evening of March 15, 2021, when Clara Thompson, a trusted babysitter, would walk into the master bedroom to find Daniel's lifeless body. As the investigation began, the focus shifted quickly to the Ward family's inner circle. And the question everyone asked was the same: who would want to kill Daniel Ward, and why? It was around 10:15 p.m. when Clara Thompson, a 17-year-old high school student, arrived at the Ward residence for her evening babysitting job. The children were already asleep, and Daniel and Melissa had left for a dinner party, giving Clara a quiet night ahead. She had been babysitting for the Ward family for nearly 2 years and had come to know their routine well. It was a regular night, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary when she settled in the living room, engrossed in her phone and watching a show. However, everything would change when Clara noticed the bedroom door slightly ajar. It was an odd thing to observe because Daniel and Melissa always kept their bedroom door closed when they weren't at home. Clara dismissed it at first, assuming maybe they had forgotten, but curiosity soon took over. Around 11 p.m., the sudden sound of a door creaking open from upstairs drew Clara's attention. It wasn't the usual noise she would expect from the children's room, where the door sometimes opened and shut in their sleep. A cold shiver ran down her spine as the door at the top of the stairs seemed to shift ever so slightly. Hesitant, she decided to investigate. Clara made her way quietly up the staircase and past the children's rooms. When she reached the master bedroom, she noticed the door was still ajar. Stepping closer, she peered inside. The sight that greeted her would stay with her for the rest of her life. Daniel Ward lay motionless on the floor beside the bed, a blood-stained knife in his chest. His face, usually full of life and expression, was now still, his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling in a cold and vacant gaze. Blood had pooled beneath him, staining the expensive hardwood flooring and spreading out like an ominous pool. His once pristine shirt was soaked in red, the evidence of a swift and violent attack. Clara froze in place. Her heart raced as the reality of what she was seeing hit her. Panic and disbelief took hold of her body. What had happened here? She hadn't heard a sound. There was no indication that anything was amiss, and yet here lay the body of the man she had known for months, in an unmistakably brutal and deliberate position. With her breath caught in her throat, Clara stepped back slowly and turned to leave the room. Her first instinct was to call 911, but her mind couldn't seem to focus. The weight of the discovery kept her rooted in place. Finally, she forced herself to move, reaching for her phone in a daze. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone. Someone's been murdered, Clara managed to gasp, her voice trembling. She described the scene as best as she could, and within minutes the police arrived, their sirens cutting through the quiet night. The officers made their way into the house, followed by paramedics who quickly confirmed what Clara had already seen. Daniel Ward was dead. His body was removed from the bedroom, and the crime scene was sealed off, with investigators pouring into the house. As the investigation began, it became clear that there was no sign of forced entry into the home. Everything appeared to be in its place, save for the bloody crime scene. No valuables were missing, and there were no immediate signs of a struggle. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. The more the officers examined the room, the more they realized this wasn't a random act of violence. It was personal. Clara was questioned immediately as the last person to see Daniel alive. She had found the body, so she was the prime witness. She explained what she had seen and described the state of the house in detail, but the detectives couldn't shake the feeling that something about the situation was off. Her reaction seemed genuine, yet they couldn't rule out the possibility that she might have witnessed something more than she let on. The discovery of Daniel's body would mark the beginning of a case filled with mysteries, questions, and shifting suspicions. The investigation would soon reveal that the Ward family's seemingly perfect life was hiding a much darker secret. The discovery of Daniel Ward's body in the master bedroom had thrown the small town of Fairfax into chaos. Detective Rachel Harris, an experienced investigator with a sharp eye for detail, took charge of the case. She knew the first step was to understand the layout of the crime scene. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared to be stolen, which immediately suggested that the perpetrator was someone familiar with the household. Clara, the babysitter, had been the last to see Daniel alive. She found his body after hearing an unusual noise coming from the upstairs area. Her statement to the police, though calm, raised suspicion. Clara claimed to have been watching television in the living room after Daniel had gone into his office, but she had no real alibi for the time between her last sighting of him and when she discovered the body. Detective Harris immediately focused her attention on Clara. There was no indication of struggle, and the murder weapon, a kitchen knife, was found next to Daniel's body, its handle wiped clean but still bearing a trace of blood. It seemed like a deliberate act, and the careful positioning of the knife suggested that the killer wanted to leave a clear sign of their presence. Clara's calm demeanor only deepened the detective's suspicions. As Harris continued her investigation, she learned that Clara had been facing financial difficulties. She had been working as a babysitter for the Ward family for several months, and according to her financial records, she had been living paycheck to paycheck, relying heavily on the money from her part-time work. Her recent debts, including loans from payday lenders, painted a picture of a young woman under significant pressure. The Ward family had been going through their own financial struggles. Daniel, who had built a reputation as a successful businessman, had been dealing with mounting debts. It was clear that the Ward family was under financial strain, but Harris knew this wasn't enough to suggest a direct link to the murder. There had to be more to the story. Then came a breakthrough. A closer look at Daniel's phone records revealed a series of text messages from a mysterious number sent in the days leading up to his death. The texts were cryptic, but implied that Daniel had been involved in some form of blackmail. The anonymous sender threatened to expose Daniel's financial mismanagement unless he paid a substantial sum. The detective had a strong hunch that this blackmailer might have been a factor in his murder. Further investigation into Clara's personal life revealed an unsettling connection between her and the mysterious texts. Clara had been in contact with a local pawn shop, where she had recently sold several valuable items, including electronics and jewelry. This raised the question: was Clara being manipulated by someone, or had she become involved in a financial scheme to secure money for herself? Then, a neighbor came forward with new information. Mrs. Jenkins, who lived next door to the Ward family, recalled seeing someone leaving the house at around 10:30 p.m. the night of the murder. The individual had been wearing a distinctive red jacket, which Clara had worn when she first arrived at the Ward house. This detail was key. Clara had claimed to have been inside the house when Daniel was murdered, but now the timing seemed suspicious. Clara had left after the murder, but she had not gone directly home. Instead, she had been seen entering a nearby store at midnight, purchasing a bottle of water. The sighting was a significant lead, and it led Detective Harris to question Clara's involvement even more. Surveillance footage from the store confirmed that Clara had been there, but the footage also showed her walking around the store without any signs of panic or distress. This was not the behavior of someone who had just discovered a murder in the house. It seemed as if Clara had been trying to cover her tracks, acting as though nothing had happened. Harris knew it was time to confront Clara. With no solid alibi and the mounting evidence, Clara became the prime suspect. The forensic evidence, including fingerprints found on the drawer where the murder weapon had been stored, pointed directly to her. Clara had made a series of critical mistakes, leaving traces behind in the house. Yet, as the investigation unfolded, it became clear that there was more to the story than a simple crime of opportunity. Clara's interactions with Daniel in the days before his death were also examined. It was discovered that Clara had been deeply frustrated with her financial situation and her lack of control over her own life. Had she been pushed to the breaking point by her mounting debts, or was there a more personal reason for her actions? The investigation was still far from over, but the pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. As Detective Rachel Harris pieced together the details, the investigation took an unexpected turn. Clara, once the prime suspect, had started to reveal cracks in her story. A forensic analysis of Clara's phone records added an unnerving new layer to the case. Hidden among the phone logs was a call she had made just hours before Daniel's body was discovered. The call had been placed to a number that Clara had failed to mention during her previous interviews. When the number was traced, it led back to a name that sent shockwaves through the investigation: Catherine Ward, Daniel's wife. At first, the discovery seemed implausible. Why would Clara be in contact with Catherine, especially if the two were supposed to have no personal connection? Harris soon learned that Clara and Catherine had been more closely linked than anyone could have imagined. In fact, Clara and Catherine had met a few months earlier, when Catherine hired Clara to babysit for the family. What seemed like a simple professional arrangement had evolved into a complex, covert relationship. Over the course of their time together, Clara and Catherine had become close. So close, in fact, that Catherine had confided in Clara about the stress she was experiencing in her marriage. Daniel's infidelity, his gambling habits, and his spiraling finances had all been subjects of deep concern for Catherine. The plot thickened when Harris found out that Catherine had been struggling with her own set of secrets. The phone call between Clara and Catherine had been about something more than babysitting arrangements. The call was a coded conversation about the financial issues they had been discussing for weeks, and now they were talking about how to resolve it. The connection between Clara and Catherine wasn't just casual. It was driven by a shared need for control over a collapsing financial situation. What Harris discovered next would challenge everything the investigation had previously believed. A search of Catherine Ward's personal records revealed that she had been actively seeking a way out of her marriage. There were emails between her and a lawyer discussing divorce proceedings, and there were also mentions of a substantial life insurance policy on Daniel. The sum was significant, and it seemed Catherine had been preparing for a life without him. But what she didn't know was that Clara, her trusted babysitter, was in possession of information that could bring everything crashing down. Clara had access to sensitive details about the Ward family's finances, and she was not the only one aware of the life insurance policy. With new evidence in hand, Detective Harris dug deeper into Clara's life. Clara had been in constant contact with a local pawn shop where she had been selling off items from the Ward family home. Among these items were valuable pieces of jewelry, some of which had previously belonged to Catherine. Clara had been pawning off family heirlooms to support her mounting debt, all while maintaining her facade as the innocent, hard-working babysitter. But her desperation to cover up her tracks had led her to make a fatal mistake. She had kept some of the stolen items hidden in her apartment, and Harris had obtained a warrant to search her home. What they found stunned everyone involved in the investigation. In the back of Clara's closet, hidden beneath a pile of clothes, were two important pieces of evidence: an envelope containing a series of documents related to the life insurance policy on Daniel Ward, and a detailed letter from Catherine, written just days before Daniel's death. The letter was a confession, but it wasn't about a crime. It was about a plan. Catherine had instructed Clara to make sure Daniel wouldn't be around long enough to collect on the life insurance policy. The letter also included an ultimatum. Clara was to make it look like an accident or a robbery, ensuring that Catherine would inherit everything. The final shock came when Harris received a cryptic message from Clara's phone. It had been sent hours after Daniel's death and was directed at a familiar contact, Catherine Ward. The message read, "It's done. Everything is set. He won't be coming back." The revelation left Harris reeling. Clara had been part of a conspiracy, but she wasn't acting alone. While Catherine Ward had seemed like a victim in the investigation, the truth revealed a far more sinister plan, one that Clara had unwittingly become entangled in. The murder was no longer just a simple crime of passion or betrayal. It had evolved into something much larger. The manipulation, the hidden deals, and the desperation to protect financial stability had led to the unthinkable, a calculated murder designed to benefit both Clara and Catherine. Harris now had the final pieces of the puzzle. Clara had been caught in the web of deceit spun by Catherine, but she had still played a significant role in the crime. The meticulous planning, the message sent to Catherine, and the hidden documents all pointed to a chilling truth. Clara had knowingly assisted in the murder. Whether out of fear, desperation, or an agreement between the two women, Clara had been a key player in this crime. With these revelations, the case was no longer just about solving the murder of Daniel Ward. It had grown into a larger story of manipulation, betrayal, and a web of lies that ensnared everyone involved. As Clara Hendricks' trial entered its final stages, the quiet town of Willowsbrook found itself at the center of a highly publicized courtroom drama. The charges against Clara were grave: first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Eleanor Brooks, was focused on presenting the evidence that clearly tied Clara to the crime. Detective Rachel Harris took the stand as the star witness, walking the jury through the investigation that had unearthed Clara's role in Daniel Ward's death. The prosecution laid out a detailed narrative, connecting Clara's actions on the night of the murder to the critical pieces of evidence that had been gathered. The blood-stained knife, the hidden life insurance policy, and the pawned items all pointed to Clara's involvement. They argued that Clara had knowingly taken part in a calculated plot to murder Daniel Ward, motivated by financial desperation and Catherine Ward's manipulation. The text message sent by Clara to Catherine after the murder, "It's done," was central to the case, painting a picture of someone who had carefully planned and executed the crime. Clara's defense, led by attorney David White, attempted to refocus the narrative. They claimed that Clara had been manipulated by Catherine, whom they painted as the mastermind behind the murder. According to the defense, Clara had been coerced into taking part in the crime, believing that she was simply helping a friend. White portrayed Clara as a victim of Catherine's emotional pressure, emphasizing that she had no motive to kill Daniel herself. The defense attempted to evoke sympathy for Clara, pointing to her history as a trusted babysitter and a community member with no prior criminal record. Clara's testimony became the focal point of the trial. She described her long-standing relationship with Catherine and explained her involvement in the crime as a misguided attempt to help a friend. However, Clara's testimony was disjointed and lacked the emotion that many expected. She spoke about Catherine's financial struggles and her own personal difficulties, but her calm demeanor throughout the testimony raised doubts in the minds of the jurors. Clara's failure to express remorse, coupled with her cold, controlled manner, worked against her in the eyes of the jury. The prosecution made sure to counter the defense's claims. They showed Clara's financial records, which revealed the extent of her debt and the embezzlement from the Ward family's accounts. Clara's financial desperation was clear, and the prosecution argued that this, combined with the emotional manipulation by Catherine, had driven her to commit the murder. The jury was also shown Clara's previous actions, her decision to pawn off items from the Ward home, and the fact that she had been the last person to see Daniel alive. These actions painted a picture of a woman who had been actively involved in the crime, not just a passive participant. After days of intense testimony and arguments, the jury began deliberating. The evidence against Clara was overwhelming. Her fingerprints had been found on the drawer where the murder weapon was stored, and her involvement in the financial theft was undeniable. The text message she sent to Catherine after the murder was damning, as it showed that Clara had been aware of the gravity of the crime and was fully complicit in its aftermath. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury was left with little doubt about Clara's role in the murder. The deliberations were short, and after just a few hours, they returned with a verdict. Clara Hendricks was guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. As the judge pronounced the sentence, Clara's expression remained unchanged. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was filled with mixed emotions. While the Ward family and the town of Willowsbrook had received some measure of justice, the impact of Clara's betrayal was profound. The babysitter, once trusted by so many, had turned out to be the orchestrator of a cold and calculated murder. For the community, the trial had exposed a side of Clara that no one could have imagined. The woman they had known as kind and dependable was capable of acts that defied belief. The courtroom drama had brought closure to the case, but it left the town grappling with the unsettling realization that even the most trusted people could harbor dark secrets. As Clara was led away in handcuffs, a once trusted babysitter, whose calm and steady demeanor had earned her the respect of many, was now a convicted murderer. Clara's betrayal shattered not only the Ward family, but also the fabric of a community that had placed their trust in her. The revelation that she was capable of such a cold and calculated crime left many reeling from disbelief, trying to understand how someone so familiar and reliable could turn into a murderer. As Clara was led to prison to begin her sentence, the town of Brook was left to pick up the pieces. The Ward family, though they had seen justice served, would never be the same again. Their loss, compounded by the betrayal of a trusted figure, was immeasurable. For the residents of Willowsbrook, the case was a harsh reminder that not everything and everyone is as they appear. But as we reflect on this case, it leaves us with more than just the facts. It raises questions about trust, betrayal, and the dark motivations that can lie beneath even the most familiar faces. How often do we overlook the warning signs in those we trust? Could Clara's actions have been prevented, or was the betrayal inevitable? What would drive a seemingly kind and dependable person to murder? This case, like many others, challenges our perceptions of the people we think we know. It leaves us wondering just how well we truly understand the people in our lives.